There it is. Okay. Does anyone have any questions before we get going?
Not
The
me.
only thing, David, if you can adjust on your note, you have us listed for Sioux City, Iowa. Can you change that to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, please?
Sioux
Falls,
Falls,
South Dakota.
I get that wrong.
That's so we have multiple addresses, but the Sioux Falls address is our kind of headquarters. So
Okay, got it. Okay, let me do something else here real quick so I can see everybody as I am talking and read my notes. All right, gentlemen, just a sec. Want to see your pretty faces and my notes at the same time. Dun, dun, dun.
completely forgot today is our open house for our 40th anniversary, and so I had to tell everyone. I was like, everyone, leave my office alone. Like, we should be done by the time customers start walking into the office. So
Right.
I just know that a couple of my clients are going to just like burst right through the office door in the middle of it.
Well, that might be good unless they come in bursting.
Hey, why don't you come and contribute?
What the hell is going on with my IT? edit.
Cut that one. That's fine.
Okay. All right, guys. I got my screen here ready. All right. So I'm just going to kick off with reading the intro, state the topic of the conversation, ask how everyone's doing, and then I'll just start off with the 10,000 event overview question. I'm not necessarily going to go in order. There's a good chance I will because I did place these in what I feel like is conversational. However, just respond to how I ask it shit. All right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another recording of Bits and Bytes CEO Insights. And today we are joined by Chris Olson, IT Director of Catalyst IT at Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Ed Burton, CEO of ThinkTech Advisors out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and Kevin Kilpatrick, President of Kilpatrick IT out of Merrimack, New Hampshire. And today, our topic of discussions will be around lessons learned from the CDK hack and lessons learned from the CrowdStrike crash. How's everyone doing today?
Great, doing well.
Great, thank you, David.
Yeah, excited to talk about this. I remember that week very well when the CDK hack happened, and it was first fascinating that it was even a possibility, but fascinating in how much it got people to relook at how they're set up. But let's just first start off with there's a 10,000 overview of the CDK hack in case some out there are not quite familiar. So what happened? Who wants to kick things off here?
I guess I can start. CDK is software run by car dealerships and auto manufacturers as well. That is their complete line of business software. It runs accounting, service, parts, sales, soup to nuts. So everything in the company is tied to this software. CDK was hacked by an organization called, I believe it's Black Suit. Thank you.
Black Suit, yeah.
And brought down their entire network. Then they began to bring some things back up, and they were hacked again, which shut them down for almost a month ultimately. So yeah, it was not a good thing.
No, it wasn't. No, that's a great, real high overview of it. And let's dig into some of the details of the consequences. What happened immediately following the hack? What were some of the consequences dealerships faced in that moment?
You can go and talk a little bit about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So what we saw immediately is obviously CDK, because of its massive control and being the primary DMS software for a large number of dealers. Dealerships were offline, right? I mean, it's the core business. It is, as Kevin said, it runs everything within their environment. So immediately dealerships were brought down. Part of the story along that, as Kevin said, that there was multiple phases within it. And so what we saw is that a lot of dealerships going through the process of trying to recover and scramble to try and adapt without all the information. They got multiple announcements throughout that process of they were back online and then they were back offline. So, at a base level, just everything was brought to a screeching halt. And we can kind of talk about it a little bit further about, some of the responses to that. But I wanted to make sure, Ed, if you want to provide any additional information there as you saw it.
Yeah, well, that's great, Chris. I think that's a great summary. They were kicked into just chaos. It controls so much of their business, from accounting, repair, parts, in addition to contracts and sales, that it crippled them completely. And then the other thing I was going to say is the subsequent attempts, the impersonation attempts from outsiders trying to piggyback on this, claiming to be CDK, claiming to have a solution, and really just was another hacking attempt.
Yeah, that was huge. That was going on all over the place. We put out multiple announcements on LinkedIn and say, yo. They are not. Yeah, they are not. Here is their number. They are not contacting you. Do not reply. Do not. So I only can imagine how additional problems that caused. But we'll just focus on the main CDK hack and some of the vulnerabilities. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. One thing I want to add that I don't think we've mentioned yet is CDK is completely cloud-based. There is no local backup for servers for the dealerships themselves. There's no local at all. It's completely cloud-based, and the dealerships are completely dependent on CDK to run and manage their infrastructure properly.
Well, Kevin, that perfectly segues to what I want to ask you all is what vulnerabilities did this expose with people who use CDK? Where are they at risk if they put all their eggs in that basket? And then we'll go into potentially what else can be done so they are not as exposed. But what vulnerabilities did it expose here for dealerships who are that reliant on them?
I would say that what it really exposed, as you said, David, is dealerships having all their eggs in one single basket. There's a lot of advantages for efficiency that comes out of that by having a single source to be your ultimate record to run the business there. But it exposes that if that goes down, you're completely offline. So that's a huge component of it. And a CDK, because as Kevin said, it is all cloud-based, and the way that they set up their infrastructure for you to have connectivity to it, you're entirely dependent upon CDK to operate. And what it exposed as a major vulnerability is a lot of resilience issues with a number of dealers and their ability to adapt if that software is offline. And that's something that we can talk about for when it comes to ways to respond. But ultimately, a lot of businesses didn't have any incident response plans. They had no alternative route to take here. And that was the biggest fault. We're not going to be able to really say for a while exactly what happened to CDK. We don't know their vulnerabilities as they're going through those investigations there. But what we can say is for the businesses that we've interfaced with and worked with, not having processes and procedures was a big vulnerability that came out of it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I don't even think I'm really putting it out of order because, quite frankly, it's kind of in order in real life right now, in the sense that this happened, you were doing things one way. Okay, here's how you need to respond. and then we'll skip forward or backwards into what people could have done ahead of time and what they can do now to prevent it in the future, right? So let's talk about that incident response. Why don't y'all talk about what y'all did or individually to help with companies, as well as best practices for other companies on, hey, if this happens, A, B, C, and D need to be done in the spirit of keeping those darn dealerships operating and open. I believe one of our clients told us when they're down, it's like six figures, 100,000 in the 100,000s per hour, if I'm not mistaken, something crazy like that. So incident response. This happens again. What should a company do? What can an IT person do right away to just get things operational?
I think this was really eye-opening for a lot of dealerships, and as much bad came out of this, if anything good does come out, it's exactly what Chris said: is awareness of the need for a plan, incident plan, disaster plan, contingency plan, whatever you want to call it, but a plan that's tested. And the good news for some of these dealerships is they've already had to do this by fire. So they know what the plan is, they know how to respond. They just need to now document it and test it, make sure they have all the pieces and parts in place to proceed if something like this happens again.
And I know there are some organizations that just practice internet out days. Boom, the internet's gone. What do you do now? So that they can institute their plan. They don't tell the employees this is coming. It's a blind test. And that's a great idea. Right?
That is
Test
a great
that
idea.
A couple of times a year for a day.
Oh, that is an excellent idea. I hadn't heard of that. I've heard of incident response plans, and I've heard of phishing campaigns and testing your employees that way, but I've never heard of like a fire drill of internet out. It's a great idea. Does anyone want to share any ideas on a walkthrough of one of y'all's incident response plans for something specifically like this? I'm not sure if I'm asking for, company or, ancient recipe secrets here. But does anyone want to share anything?
I would contribute again to just create a plan and have a real thoughtful process around, if this is out, what are we going to do? If it's resort to pen and paper, like many of these dealerships had to, make sure they've at least agreed on this is how we're going to operate when the system goes down, because as we've seen, it certainly can.
Okay, go ahead.
For any company, formulating this plan as a group effort, right? It can't just be the CEO wrote this down and do this. That every department head has to be involved with the other people in their department. What happens if we lose this? What are we going to do? What do we need ahead of time? Do we need pre-written spreadsheets? Do we need PDFs that we can use as forms, that kind of thing, so that we can log data properly until our software comes back?
Understood.
So one thing,
now, go ahead.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit into this.
Please.
So one of the things that recommend, and we've talked about, Ed, Kevin, and I, and we've talked about this in the past, is doing a risk analysis piece for a business, and not just specific to the CDK piece, but when you're going through as a business and you're doing a tabletop exercise and trying to figure out exactly where my risk is at, line iteming out to say exactly what do you depend upon. And this can get very fundamental. I need email. Okay, so that's a risk, right? But how dependent are you upon that? And so you have your accounting software, you have your business processes, you have your DMS in this, you have all of those different things. And then from there, what is the likelihood and what is the cost associated with trying to respond? And some of those things you may find out you can't do anything about. Right? You can't control that CDK went offline. There's things that you can do to mitigate fallout in actions that all of us took for our clients. But within that, by identifying that you have no control, you then have to take a look at what are the things you can do and respond. So as Ed was saying, paperwork, right? Do you have the appropriate Excel spreadsheets to be able to handle orders and service requests and doing warranty lookup and making sure you have customer information, and that not just that you have a plan, but also that you dust it off at least annually and walk through it. So the call out of having a no internet day is fantastic, and so that's why we call it a tabletop exercise. Is let's actually walk through this, because we all remember fire drills when, school or any evacuation. I grew up on the coast, so we had to do tsunami drills, right? So that was a different thing for me. We ran through it. And so if that alarm were to go off, and I can tell you, we had a real live incident in which an alarm went off and every single kid in the school knew what to do and immediately ran out of the bed, went through the full exercise because it was muscle memory at that moment. Because the last time you want to figure out what your plan is to deal with a disaster is when the building is on fire and go, we should build a plan right now.
No, that's a great point. We as human beings have that it's not going to happen to me, thing.
Right.
And so I think at the very beginning here, we talked, there's going to be some good fallout from this because, again, the thought of turning off your internet for a minute, let alone an hour, is shudders IT, folks. But like, yeah, hopefully somebody's listening to this. Say, you know what? Let's plan around this once a year. Once a year, we rally around and we have our fun internet day, and we have everything prepared so nobody freaks out. But that is I think that is a great idea. Now, in the spirit of taking some of the eggs out of the CDK basket, I know we had one of our dealerships set up a different way. Unfortunately, I am not going to speak on it too much because I don't want to. The Peter principle with me is involved in this. But in talking with our operations director, a couple of our dealerships were still operational because we had segmented parts of their infrastructure out of CDK. Are you all familiar with that as well? And if so, can you share how somebody can segment in the future so that they're not completely reliant on another company's potential issues?
Well, and what you're talking about, we refer to as SPF, single point of failure. So if your entire organization is dependent on one company's software, that's sort of a danger signal, right? So maybe you could separate out your accounting, for instance, or separate out inventory management, or different pieces of the puzzle. While it's really convenient, and in sometimes cases necessary to have it all under one application, it can also be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I'll say one thing that's unique to CDK is that they use network appliances to create a tunnel and run your internet through them to gain access to CDK. And something that we did with a number of our customers, the way that the network is set up, is that CDK traffic is one way while the rest of the internet traffic is another. And so in response to it as a mitigation action, we stepped in and severed the connection to CDK as they were taking efforts to recover from the attack, which allowed our clients to be able to be up and running because internet traffic was unimpeded. So they still had the ability to deal with emails. They still had the ability to get online and do lookups. But their core function tied to CDK, for those clients that were using CDK, they couldn't access it. And also, they were cut off from being able to access it in case there was some downstream effects that happened there.
Was that retroactive, Chris, or is that how you had it done beforehand?
That's how we had it done before. We've worked with customers using CDK for a number of years, and there's many different ways that CDK wants to set up their network. And one thing that we've done with a couple of them is have that separation there. And so that way we were able to cut off the route of traffic to CDK, so that way there was no connection there, but they were still running for internet.
It sounds like you have a very happy client there then, because I mean, granted, they were going through some issues, but they had a lot less because they could literally stay somewhat operational, if I'm hearing.
Well, I would hope that they're happy with us, but they definitely weren't happy with CDK during.
Well, no. with you. I mean, at some point, if it's raining, but you can be happy that you have shelter more than the other, So I mean, it is what it is. But I am gonna want to put each of you on the spot, not you anymore, Chris, because you shared that. But Ed and Kevin, if you all were starting a car dealership, or your advice on the IT department for one, what is one piece of advice on a pre-setup, to on something that they can set up if something like this happens again, that they're a little bit more protected in the sense of being down. Again, it's so costly. Obviously, we could get into security and all this other stuff, but the purpose of this conversation is operationally staying up because it's so costly when something like this happens. So Ed, Kevin, what would your piece of advice be to do ahead of time to guard against something like this if it happens again?
Well, instead of like one specific solution today at this point in time, I think my advice would be more be aware of the changing landscape of cybersecurity threats, because this changes all the time. If we came up with a solution today, we might need a new solution tomorrow. But being aware of the threat, being aware of the risk, being aware of the cyber landscape that we have to deal with every day, and leverage industry experts, leverage people who do this professionally to help come up with these ideas. Chris had a great idea. Leverage ideas of others who have done this successfully.
Gotcha. Just to piggyback that, yeah, the ever-changing cybersecurity landscape. I will just say that and y'all gonna agree or disagree or give me an attaboy, is the applications, the software applications. It seems like those are getting attacked more now than ever. Not just your email applications, but all the logins, all the different applications people are using. It seems like a lot of focus has been turned towards that from the hackers. Email, obviously, but I think we're all getting a little bit smarter. Like, that's smelly. That really smells fishy, right? No pun intended or pun intended. So anywho, I just wanted to throw that in there, Ed. You're right. I mean, and with all these different cloud-based applications that people are losing, like, you got to start protecting those doorways now, big time, right away. Anywho, Kevin, what takeaway can you leave us for people to protect themselves moving forward?
Sure. And this doesn't apply to only car dealerships, but every business, right?
Sure.
So it happened to be car dealership software this time. And then the company that ran that software obviously was not prepared for this type of event. So vet the companies you do business with very carefully. In this case, that was very difficult because this software was recommended by the manufacturers to the dealers as well. So it was sort of a major debacle on that side. But in general, if you're totally dependent or dependent on any cloud application, say it's accounting, download P&Ls and balance sheets every week or every month at least. Have backups of your client data lists. Have a copy of your AR report. Have some of these essential items at least backed up with paper or into electronic files such as Excel or somewhere else where you have access to at least basic data. Because if you don't even have access to your P&L or any of your accounts receivable, you don't even know who owes you money. I mean, that's a potentially business-ending event. So you want to keep very close to the vest all that stuff and try to back it up on a regular basis. Most of these softwares will allow you to download to CSV files or Excel spreadsheets, and that's a great idea to do that on a regular basis.
I love that, Kevin, and to potentially ease the anxiety of the gotta do's or whatever. That can be automated. If I don't know, but can it be automated? Can you get rules and regulations where something like that just, you have your automated backups? Obviously, you need to be checking to make sure that they're functioning and firing off correctly. But can something like this also be put into some rules and it can just happen on a weekly, daily, monthly basis?
In most cases, sure.
Okay. All right. Well, very cool, gentlemen. Let's any parting thoughts on the CDK hack? Anything that people can maybe go back and relook to see if XYZ could have, can be helpful to rectify and or moving forward? Anything anybody want to leave us with?
I'll just add one thing. CDK is a huge company. They started out with car dealerships back in the day as ADP in 1973. They were a very trusted company. They got bought by venture capitalist stuff. But anyway, they don't blindly trust these companies. You can't, right? So they've been around a long, long time. They've been running this stuff a long, long time, and boom, they weren't ready. They ended up paying, I think, $25 million in ransom because they couldn't restore the data. So obviously they didn't have a focus on security. Hugely trustworthy company, everybody thought, until they weren't. So always be vigilant. Don't trust anyone. Do your own research and your own backups and plan for disaster, because it's not if, but when, probably.
I mean, just look at some of the companies out there that have been hacked and, they have more money than you do. MGM, CDK, I mean, if you can pay 25 million, then you have a lot of money. And so it can even happen to them. But yeah, I hear you. My piece of advice would be all eggs in one basket. Very scary. Always, always, always. Segment stuff. Have your disaster plan. I mean, that's not I'm recapping y'all's. But yeah, I love everything y'all have said. A lot of this is simply meat and potatoes. There is not always a magic wand. You may have forgotten that some of these are good for you, but do them. Have that incident response. Do your testing. Do your fire drills, so to speak, and don't trust anybody, right? So I love it. Now let's move on to the CrowdStrike crash. We're talking about another really big company. That is not a hack. They had said it was not a hack. It was on a software update. But let y'all talk about that a little bit. If somebody wants to take exactly what happened, how it impacted users, and then we'll get into some broader questions here. Ed, I'm going to sing you out, sir.
I don't think it certainly wasn't a hack. I mean, this was essentially a poorly tested software update that auto-distributed across many systems. And by the way it's designed to interact with the operating system, rendered all these systems inoperable. So at the operating system level.
But I mean, we're reliant on these cloud-based security platforms, right? And there's only so much you can do, I would think. I mean, there's one thing by not trusting anybody, but somebody like CrowdStrike, I mean, you have a huge trust in if that's the software that you're utilizing. So, I mean, what can IT? I can imagine being an IT lead in a company and then just bang my head against the wall. Like what could have I had done here? So I really want y'all to just help people out here. I guess we're talking again about incident response again here potentially, but what could somebody do to deal with this, either pre something like this potentially happening, and then if and when it does, what can they do afterwards to, I guess on an incident response? What advice do y'all have?
So
it's tough. It's a bit of a tough question, y'all.
Yeah,
This is tough.
So the thing that I have kind of coming off of this, it's kind of a double-edged sword situation in which that, zero-day vulnerabilities and the need to stay patched and in front of this stuff is so critical that you kind of have to accept a little bit of this vulnerability that comes out of that. To Kevin's point of not trusting vendors and doing due diligence on them, we kind of have to push back towards them to say that they need to be doing better to ensure that they have those controls in place. For me, I think that this is a really great lesson of not having all your eggs in one basket. And that's one of the things that the industry is really pushing towards aggressively is for you to have single company control and have kind of a single pane of glass and have all of your security tools or management tools all tied into one thing. And I would be a big proponent against that. Because what you end up with is that if you have a single failure, as we talked about with CDK and the dependency upon that, you're now rife for this to happen to you. And so how can you avoid this? Don't have a full dependency upon a single piece of software. That wouldn't necessarily fix the problem with CrowdStrike that happened for their update, but to avoid this becoming a bigger cascading issue, don't have all of your eggs in one basket there.
So what does that look like in regards to like a CrowdStrike? If you're not going to be paying for two, right? Like what would that look like as far as a bit of segmentation? I mean, meaning like you could have this fail, but then you have a stopgap over here where only this much failure happened. Again, this is out of your control. It's CrowdStrike, right? So what would that look like? Because again, even leading up to this conversation today, we were kind of gabbing. I was like, man, this is really confusing to me on what solutions lie here. Because there's some point in time, it's just like, it's not your fault, but that doesn't help anybody, like, right? Like let's at least mitigate the damages. So what, again, y'all are the experts here. We know that this is a possibility now. I mean, I guess we should have known that, but this one was shocking. What would one do right away to like, oh shit, this happened. Let's put the walls up, right? Like what would you do if this happens next time, like right away for somebody to at least pause things so nobody, knowing that you're a little bit vulnerable, right? Well, a lot of bit vulnerable at that moment.
Well,
See,
there's
I
a few
think
things.
whether
Oh, go
it's
ahead.
CDK or CrowdStrike, either one, it comes back to business continuity planning. We talked about having the plan, we talked about testing the plan, but essentially it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it was a QC issue or a hack. If the system's down and inoperable, the impact to the business is the same. And the business must have a continuity plan to deal with these type of issues.
And the problem with the CrowdStrike one was, while it rendered the computers inoperable, it also required manual intervention, physical manual intervention, sitting in front of the machine to remediate the problem. So there was no way to just push a script and say, okay, yeah, these are all fixed. Somebody had to sit in front of the machine, delete certain files or back off certain files, and then reboot the machine twice. And I mean, it was a nightmare issue for a lot of people. So yeah, it's a pretty unique issue. I have read recently that Microsoft is taking steps to limit how much access antivirus software has to the base levels of the operating system, called the kernel. So we'll see what happens from that point. But yeah, this one is a tough one.
I think that,
go ahead.
For what Ed was saying on the piggybacking from both of those, is that with the disaster recovery and preparedness, is that you need to also recognize that not everything can have an immediate fix. There's not a single IT person that was facing this, that realizing that they have to deal with thousands of assets that need manual intervention, that was excited on that. But a lot of our response plans,
contract labor was probably.
Yeah. I mean, anyone that's by the hour was really excited, but
yeah, they were stoked.
The reality is that not everything can be an immediate fix. We can't just push out a script, right? We can't just run, a flip of a switch. And while we can try to have our disaster recovery plan have restore time objectives be really tight, we also have to plan as a business for when the worst happens and say, okay, we want the ideal situation where we're going to be offline for this amount of time. But what if we can't be this? How do we keep going when we're going to be offline this long? And so part of the disaster recovery preparedness that you need to be doing, that Ed is really advocating here, and we all strongly advocate for, is prepare for all scenarios, not just the ideal scenario. What happens if the backup fails? Okay, so how do we then respond there and ensure that we have a backup of the backup? And how do we keep up and running?
Yeah, I was very curious what we were going to hear today. I know that there's no magic wands, magic pills to take, and it really sounds like, if you were looking for that, I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. But B, we're really driving home, this planning and preparation for incidents. I know we talk about it a lot. I know we go about this in our technology business reviews. How do y'all? Let's leave with this. I want us to let you all tell me what you're doing for your client. And I want people to hear this, business owners, IT folks who are using an outside company. If one of these ways isn't happening for you, take it back to the owner, take it back to your current IT provider and say, we got to start doing this. And here's how they do it. So Chris, 20 seconds, Kevin, then you, Ed. Walk me through how y'all set those up in your procedures, because you're not just going to say, oh, here's our, I'm sure there's a process that you work with your clients with. How do you go about it, Chris?
Okay. Inventory all of your line of business applications, your business processes, what is mission critical. Label that, through priority. And then as you're going through that plan, map out what that cost is, how critical it is, how long you can be offline without it. And if you can't be offline without it, what is your route to be able to come up with a solution there?
Thank you. Kevin.
A lot of what Chris said, we actually use a spreadsheet for that to map out all of your critical applications. And that we call that a risk analysis. What are your highest risk applications? What is the highest cost and or effect of the company per application? Where does that data live? Is it local? Is it in the cloud? How do we recover that data? Do we have backups of that data, either paperish, like Excel spreadsheets, or regular local backups of machines? But it's all about client planning, and we encourage all our clients to come up with plans. We will help them. to make sure that you're prepared. So I think a lot of clients at the end of the day, or a lot of companies, just assume, oh, it's IT's thing, they got it. Well, IT can help you with the planning, but IT can't do all the planning because we don't know what your department requires every day, right? So we know your business well, but we can't know your day-to-day operations. So yeah, really important.
Thank you. Ed?
Yeah, and just like Chris and Kevin said, document, inventory, all the applications that are critical to the organization. And then we also help them come up with a plan, a time-based plan. So if this application is out for 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week, the response may be different. So we also elaborate or outline this based on a time horizon as well.
I really like what y'all have said, because that's going to smoke out like, oh yeah, this is, oh yeah, no, this is down for this. It's called, oh shoot, we don't have anything. Okay, let's get to work, right? So I think that's going to smoke out a lot of this for you. It might sound daunting, but it almost sounds fun too. You know, if you kind of go through all that and then you start to see where you can really protect yourself and have a plan in place, then you're like excited when something happens bad. Right now, I'm joking, but at least,
Maybe.
at least you're ready to go. At least, you know,
Your
at least,
definition of
hey,
fun
I
is
have
different than
insurance, right?
ours.
At least I got my insurance, right? You feel good that you were prepared. You know what I mean. But hey, gentlemen, this really was, you know, enlightening, and I really hope we're pushing some IT folks, some business owners to ask their IT folks that make sure that this stuff is in place, because we have just talked about 2 extremely large companies. One of them is about security. I know they weren't hacked, but still. And so it can really happen to anybody. So let's make sure that, you know, you have everything in place, you have it ready to go. So for when that time comes, you push go and you know exactly what path to take to protect yourselves and get you all back up and running. Any parting thoughts from anybody here?
Last thing I'll say is that the time to prepare for an accident and protect yourself is before the accident happens. So you got to put your seatbelt on before it occurs. You can't do it while you're going through the windshield. So
Perfect.
Agreed. And don't blindly trust all vendors, because this can happen anywhere at any time.
Except Ed, Kevin, and Chris. Oh, intern will be. All right, gentlemen. Hey, I appreciate y'all so much, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
thank
David.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
All righty, guys. I think that went well. What'd y'all think? It's a good.
I'm just proud I didn't hang